r/AskReddit. Former teachers of Reddit, what was the last straw that made you quit your job? I didn't necessarily quit, but I would have, and ultimately it's contributed to my decision to stop teaching. I taught a class well known for its ability to break even veteran teachers. They were rowdy and disrespectful, and some students had very low standardized test scores. Granted, the start of my year was rough. I had trouble controlling them since it was my first year. But once I found a good behavior management system, things smoothed out. I still had trouble with one particular student, but toward the end of the year she opened up to me about her cutting, her eating disorder, and how she was abused at home. All of their scores improved, their behavior was improved, but it wasn't enough. The principal only chose to focus on how they were at the start of the year and berated me for having such a terrible class, and that I didn't seek help from the teacher they had the year before, who nearly quit before Thanksgiving because of them, and whom all my parents had told me they disliked. So why would I seek help from her? A co-worker, also a first year teacher, was given a similarly bad class, but she had a violent student who would throw desks and chairs. The principal knew this and still gave this first year teacher that class instead of the other, more experienced teacher who taught the same grade. She also did great things with her class, and at the end of the year she found out her father had cancer and the school had fired her. They couldn't afford to increase the salary of first year teachers going into the second year, so they fired all of us. Then, at the end of the year, the orchestra put on a concert. One of my students who was on an IEP, so she had some kind of disability, but I don't know exactly what, just that she was frequently non-communicative, disengaged, not to mention her mother was bedridden and dying, really enjoyed being in the orchestra playing the violin, even though the orchestra teacher at the beginning of the year didn't want her to join, because she couldn't be trusted with an instrument. Anyway, this girl was excited for the concert. She'd come to school all dressed up, and I knew they needed to be in the gym at 1:15. So at 1:15 I'm like, okay, do you want to head down to the gym? And she doesn't say anything. Some of the other students also know she's in the orchestra and are excited to see her play, so they tell her she needs to head down there. She says the orchestra director told her she couldn't play today. I was like, WTF. So I call the head of the special ed program to ask if he knows about this, and he doesn't. Together we try to figure out what happened. Basically, that morning, the orchestra director told this girl she wasn't allowed to play in the concert. We asked her why, and she said, because she doesn't play very well and can't read music. Bitch, isn't that your job? Plus it's not the fucking symphony. Are you really worried one violin is going to ruin your elementary school orchestra performance? Although the head of SPED and myself tried to get this girl to go on and play, she was already thoroughly embarrassed and humiliated and didn't want to. I filed all kinds of complaints. This was a girl of color, on free or reduced price lunch, on an IEP, and this director is going to kick her out of the end of the year orchestra concert. The school didn't care. They did nothing. I was so upset and ashamed. It's one thing to screw over your teachers, but it's despicable to not stand up for your most vulnerable students. Sorry for the length. It's just a very frustrating story, so I have a lot to say. I wasn't a teacher, but I was a classroom assistant hired by the county. We were more like volunteers who were paid in education grants. So we made less than minimum wage, technically $2.15/HR. There was a teacher in charge of us. I'll call her Sandra. Name changed. Sandra had a lot of things to do, so I left her alone. I just kind of did my own thing by asking what teachers, if needed help day to day, showing up to Saturday school for tutoring, and doing whatever I could to help with school events. It was hard work. Tutoring for every single class that's offered, reporting physical/sexual abuse experienced by students at their homes multiple times, talked a kid out of committing suicide, learning to level with and work with kids that had severe intellectual and behavioral problems. I had no training. It was really hard. I also spent a lot of my own money on resources and supplies for students who needed them, probably more money than what I made in the first place. But, despite all of those bad things, I put up with all of it. Hundreds of hours of work for almost no pay, all because I legitimately care about those students. It's a rough school and they deserved a chance. They deserve people who care about them, structure, and someone willing to take the time to make sure they can be successful. I did it for them because somebody did it for me when I was little. Then one day Sandra asks me to be a substitute teacher for a class. I'm not allowed to do that because I don't technically work for the school. That means I can't be alone with students. I also don't have substitute teaching certifications. Sandra gets pissed, walks away angrily, then tells several part-time teaching aides, who actually work for the school and should be covering for the no-show sub, that they have to work overtime and it's my fault. She also blatantly tells them that they should teach me a lesson. She actually wrote down a list of things she doesn't like about me, mostly related to my appearance and clothes, and gave it to them. Then over the next 2 weeks, all of these teaching aides start calling me Fat Amy and Goodwill Sleeper McGee. They also do that in front of students. Then Sandra starts calling me those names. Then some of the students start doing it because they see a teacher doing it. My depression got worse. I went from insomnia due to stress to insomnia due to stress and humiliation. That was it. I transferred to a different school for the remainder of my service term, where I basically just sat in an office doing nothing. Then I didn't sign up again for the following year. TL. Doctor, I was trying very hard and working very hard. Then a vindictive teacher convinced a bunch of school employees to bully me. Someone else asked me why I decided to leave, and I wrote what I'm posting below. There wasn't really a last straw per se, but a series of situations I either couldn't work around or felt that I had no autonomy. It is a mix of things really. While I have an amazing administrator and I like my students / co-workers, etc., I don't think that I have the organization skills necessary to manage the work or the ability to not take shit personally when I receive critiques from parents. I'm in my 6th year, and I work 10 to 12 hours a day and at least one day on the weekend. The majority of this is grading / planning, and not actually teaching. I truly enjoy the teaching aspect and building relationships with my students. I promised myself that if I was still working that many hours this far into it, because it's kind of a given the first couple of years, that I would do something else. I can't work this much, it is impacting my health. When I get home I'm too tired to cook, or work out, or do anything really other than get ready for bed. The time off doesn't really rejuvenate me. We get 2 weeks off for winter break. It takes me, I'm an introvert, about 2 weeks of low activity to cycle out of the work headspace, and then we have to go back. I'm not saying we need more time off, I just don't feel rejuvenated in the way that people would assume when they cite all that time off we get. A lot of the teachers I know desperately need all of that time. Most importantly, I'm tired of the assertion by entitled parents that I'm basically a terrible human being who hates children whenever I talk to them in a non-judgmental way about concerns I have regarding their kids. I understand that their kids are a sensitive topic, but that doesn't give anyone the right to be verbally abusive. There is no recourse for this other than to end the meeting, but you still have to work with them / talk to them for the remainder of the year. And if you cross a parent and stick to your guns around doing what you think, based on your professional opinion, is best for the child, the parents will go on a smear campaign. I don't know if you have access to any school Facebook groups, but those places can be a cesspool. I honestly feel a lot of sympathy for the kids of these parents and try to give them a little extra love because I fear for the way their parents will react to their kids when they have a difference of opinion once the kids get a little older. I'm brokenhearted that in some of the worst cases there isn't anything I can do to help kids who can't read at grade level that will wind up in the system because I simply don't have the resources and their parents either don't or can't for whatever reason to intervene. When kids come into your room not reading, it impacts their ability to learn every other subject, so they're already behind, and without significant intervention they continue to be so. Teaching only works well if there are minimal barriers to accessing the information. That is not the case for the majority of kids. One of the reasons I got into teaching is because I feel that the education system in the US is a deeply flawed system. That system failed me, high school dropout, and I want to do something about that. I moved to a different school because my principal and I did not get along. It started with her accusing me of missing too many days of school after missing the first 2 weeks of the school year after having given birth to a child at the beginning of August and returning to work at exactly 6 weeks postpartum, and escalated to her accusing me of not having followed proper procedures for sick days when my son was hospitalized with RSV in December of that school year. I had followed the correct procedures, including emailing a detailed lesson plan to about 6 different people, herself included. Never got an apology from her. She called me unprofessional. It got to the point where I asked another administrator if she could look up the days I'd missed and compare them with other teachers. It turned out that if you discounted the days from my 2-week maternity leave, then I had actually missed less than the other teachers at school. Finally, she tried to pull some sort of a "your missed school day came too close to the end of the school year" and broke the union contract bullshit when I had a doctor's appointment for my kid in May of that year after not having missed a day since January except for jury duty. By that point I'd found a position at a different school, so I insisted that a union rep be present at all dealings with her from there till the end of the year. Oh, and this is without mentioning that school had more or less broken down organizationally over the course of that year, including a group of 6 students running a drug dealing ring out of their locker, multiple students threatening multiple teachers, a persistent in-school truancy problem, and more. That year, one student actually jacked off in the back of the science lab to completion, and we didn't have a regular custodian, so the science teacher ended up having to clean it up if he didn't want his classroom smelling like jizz for the rest of the day. We had students throwing chairs out of a 2nd-story window. It apparently got worse after I left too. I heard tales of one of the incoming 8th graders literally setting a kid on fire with a Bunsen burner in the same science lab. And yet, I probably could have dealt with that if the administrators had been even remotely competent. For me, it's never been the kids that have made me want to leave a school. It's always been the admin. And this principal was far and away the worst. I'm at a different school now, and it's like night and day. I'm still a student, but even being a tar, I can see how awful being a teacher is. I'm not even a tar for a challenged class, it's just a freshman engineering class. I'm a senior. Our education system is just crap. So many kids don't even think. They find the smallest thing that could give them trouble and ask before they try to work it out themselves. You'd think they'd at least try, since, you know, solving problems is actually what engineering is. But whatever. Plus, a lot of the rough kids give the teacher such crap. I'm pretty close with her. I've known her for 4 years and she's seen some of my rougher patches, but she always talks about how she wants to quit. She's applied for other jobs. The only thing keeping her here is her senior and junior classes that are attached to her. Here's just an example of a student-teacher problem we had recently in that class. For some background, there was this sped kid in our class. He mostly did nothing in there. The teacher was just like, "MK, not my problem if you won't work," so he obviously had an F in the class. His mother, however, was so convinced he was already an engineer and kept him in the dang class when you could tell he hated it. During this time, we had a sub come in because the teacher and the senior, my class, had a field trip. While we were gone, apparently, the sub had said something completely inexcusable to the sped kid. I know this sub and personally would love to see her fired. She yells at you for talking to other people in class, even if it's one small whisper about the assignment. She threatens to take kids' phones and sell them on eBay and yells a lot. She's an older Chinese lady with extreme traditional Chinese values. Nothing against them, but like, they'd probably think she's whack over there and works as a sub for the good of the school as her husband is a millionaire. Anyway, she said something very bad to this sped kid, so my teacher reports her and what she said to the school administration. Nothing ever comes of it. My school is also in the redneck territory, so we have a lot of racist hillbillies at our school. Heck, the town 5 minutes away has Confederate flags everywhere in the residential area. Anyway, these 3 Muslim girls transferred to our school from another nearby. Their old school was comfortable. I guess they just had to transfer for some reason. They didn't even last 3 days. The bullying was so bad. I heard that people would rip off their hijabs and stuff like that. The administration? Nothing. They never even acknowledged that it happened, much less tried to punish anyone. I have many stories, but my school rant ends here. B/C this post is way too long. Where do I even start? When I was interviewed for my position, I was told all classes in the school were capped at 25 students. The day before classes start, I'm up making name tags for my students when the page refreshes and suddenly I go from 25 to over 30 students in each class. I had 2 third grade classrooms. To make matters worse, at my end of the year evaluation, they took off points from me for not having enough students in my classroom, which resulted in them taking money off my performance review pay. Several parents had removed their students from my classroom when they realized that the school had falsely advertised the class size. I had a student punch me as hard as he could because another student dared him to do it. The student had exhibited violent behavior with other students and I went to admin to ask that the student either A, be moved out of my class, or B, be given the resources he needed to help him learn that physical violence was not the way to cope with frustration. The principal met with me alone in his office where he proceeded to yell and emotionally abuse me while I cried for over an hour. He called me many things, among them selfish and useless, because the student had felt the need to hit me. I had done nothing to instigate the attack. The student had not even gotten a warning that day, but was emotionally bullied by the principal into blaming myself. I learned to forgive the student and worked with him to handle his frustration, but a week later he smashed another student's glasses on his face so hard he broke the glasses and the skin of the other student. Besides my time with the student and his mother, admin never got him the resources he needed. Since I was teaching 3rd grade, my school was legally required to buy me curriculum and class books due to a read by 3 state testing law. The school bought the books and then took them away from me for using them. I was a first year teacher and then wrote me up for using them. My school had mostly teachers from overseas who were way overqualified but needed sponsors for immigration or green cards. The school would promise to sponsor them and then would never follow through. The teachers couldn't leave or get other jobs because if they did, the school would withdraw their sponsorship and the teachers would run into trouble or have to leave the country. I'm not sure of the exact details, but one of the teachers I was close with that year had worked there for 4 years and they had yet to actually follow through on any of their promises regarding this. There are so many more, but honestly not being able to pee when I needed to also just really sucked. I managed to stay through the school year because I knew if I left earlier the school would not find a replacement teacher for my students or just wouldn't even try. My co-teacher told me that the next year the school went through 4 people to replace me by October and ended up just having to divide up kids into other classrooms because no one would take the job. Sorry for the long post, but honestly it felt so good to just get some of that off my chest. Not a former teacher as I still do teach, but I'm probably going to be teaching for only a few more years if that. There is honestly too much crap going on. We are asked to be more than just teachers day by day. Teacher / parent / counselor / bodyguard / nurse / janitor / etc. I get paid to be a teacher and that's it, especially based on my paycheck. On top of the day-to-day in which I absolutely have to have my attention fully on my students for at least 6.5 hours, I need to find the time to grade assignments. Not a gripe, but it's something you need to do. Input data. For who the hell knows. Get lesson plans made. Make copies. Email or call parents. Put in orders. Not an easy process at schools. Meet with my collaborative team at least once a week for 90 minutes plus 45 minutes in some other way, and these meetings need to be logged with minutes / goals / tasks / data, cover other teachers that are out and more. And that doesn't include the evaluation process, which, if I want to be ranked high marks, I need to provide fairly considerable evidence in the form of logs, pictures, student work, etc etc. I would say that probably 80% of what I'm asked to do outside of the teacher part of my job is complete and utter bullshit that will not help me in any way. It will help my administrators look good, but that's about it. Data collection isn't helping me or my team. My students don't understand that concept. Well, not really. It's just that 30% of them don't get it. And really that's damn good considering those 30% probably just aren't paying attention. But I can't say that. I can't mention student behavior being an issue that leads to my data. Also, and this is truly the icing on the cake, that is probably going to lead to quite a few teachers just outright leaving, at least where I work. We are being asked to come up with methods to allow students to retake tests and quizzes during school hours, while also giving time to reteach material. This means we have to separate our class between the get-its and the don't get-its and find something for the get-its to do, while I reteach the don't get-its. And I can't let them leave my classroom, because I need to be able to supervise them. So the get-its figure out that it's largely me babysitting them, and the don't get-its are mostly kids that just won't get the F***K off of their phones, which I can't do anything about. It's truly horrendous. Grade changes are common. Very common. It's not just kids related to school board members or some shit. It's any kid, because you don't want to deal with the paperwork. I've seen kids with 50s suddenly have their grade shoot up to a 70 in a matter of days. We are told that it's just not worth it. In the grand scheme of things, they have other things to worry about. Yes, well, I'm sorry you feel the need to continually devalue what a high school diploma is. At this point, a HS diploma in the United States is no better than one-ply toilet paper. Might as well scrape the shit with your hand. I'm 6 years in and have taught in many different situations. I've taught elementary, high school, 2 different states, variety of STEM subjects, core, math, science, and electives. I have been in publicly recognized bad schools, good schools, great schools. Taught for some really bad administrators, had several toxic/manipulative administrators, and, more recently, better admins. I have horror stories from my first few years teaching that, upon the reflection, make me wonder that I continued to teach. Very successful and passionate teachers are often extremely undervalued because of circumstances far beyond their control. I learned quickly that there are so many factors outside of a teacher's control in the classroom. I have grown, and my skills have improved, but looking back, I have been a great teacher from the beginning of my career. You would not know this always looking at my classroom, because in years past I haven't always had the same supports as I do in my current position. As a person who needs to do a good job, it can be very difficult to manage the cognitive dissonance. This is made worse by the fact that new teachers with little experience/past reference are most often put in these situations. Laziness in teachers is often indirectly encouraged. For instance, giving students/parents what they want, encouragement, positive feedback, gold stars, vs what they need, meaningful feedback, areas of growth. Good grades are often mistaken for good teaching. Giving students good grades is easy. Teaching below current grade level is easy. Being lax on deadlines can be easy. These scenarios often boil down to choosing the path of least resistance can lead to being well liked, and a false sense of success in the classroom from everyone involved. Not laziness is exhausting, hard work, and often not appreciated. If you teach in a good environment with parent support, admin support, and some other not lazy teachers, you can begin to fight these battles. Pay is not related to effort or laziness/not laziness. I don't grade during school hours because I'm facilitating a learning experience for students. That means I have to grade afternoons and weekends. Unpaid. I don't do a lot of easy grades or bonus work. That means I have to spend time with each assignment giving meaningful feedback. Again, unpaid. I lead after school clubs for next to nothing. Less than $350 for one that takes up 72 hours of additional time with students, not counting additional administrative tasks and additional planning. So, I have not quit yet, but am working on other options. The decision came about because I realized that I cannot allow myself to go the lazy route because I have integrity, and b, I'm a fool if I continue to do what I do when it is not appreciated. British teacher here. Quit about a year back and currently doing supply work to see if I still want to teach. I was working 65-hour weeks writing entire schemes of work from scratch, deep marking every page of exercise books, highlighting spelling and grammar in green, incorrect stuff in pink, good work in blue, as well as marking tests and HW. Couldn't keep up. The head of the science department comes up with a new marking policy and gets it signed off by the principal, so now we are only marking tests and homework. Everyone is a bit happier. Fast forward a few months and my head of department has gone on maternity leave. I've been marking tests and getting the kids to do corrections and improvements as per the new policy. At the time, ACA, exam board, were checking that their new A-level syllabus was working and came in to observe me personally teaching A-level physics. I had a lot of pressure on me because if I fucked up they'd be in to observe chemistry and biology, and my colleagues hadn't been as rigorous with their marking and tracking as perhaps they should, and we were in danger of losing our certification if ACA deemed us unsatisfactory. I spent 2 weeks working long hours making sure everything was perfect. Lab books marked to within an inch of their lives, lessons written, and trackers filled in. I was quite ill at the time, but pushed through it because the others were depending on me. Get observed. Everything goes really well. We are told we are the best school they'd seen. Breathe a sigh of relief and feel like I can relax a little bit. Get no recognition, but I'm not hugely fussed. Just feel good for doing a good job. Next week, the principal gets the call from Ofsted. Shit hits the fan. He storms through the science department checking exercise books without any warning, and he bursts into my lesson while I'm trying to teach unruly year 9s without even a hello. He didn't see enough evidence of my marking because the A4 tests are too big to fit in the exercise books, so I've been keeping them separate. Told that if Ofsted see me, it would look very bad for the school. Miraculously don't get seen by the inspectors over their next 2 days, but get put on a support plan, which is just a euphemism for extra work. Despite me showing the senior leadership team the evidence of my marking and that I was following the science department's policy, I'm told I've got 4 weeks to backmark all 200 exercise books for the last 3 months and get the kids to do corrections and improvements. Each book takes over 10 minutes to mark, so that's another 9 to 10 hours of marking to add to my 60 odd hour week. I felt like I was thrown under the bus, and it didn't mean anything to the school that I'd saved them from potentially losing their whole A-level certification for science. I was their only science teacher with a physics degree, which is almost unheard of these days in the UK, but it seemed like they didn't value me in the slightest. Because wage increases are reliant on the kids pulling their thumbs out and doing well at their GCSEs regardless of what we put in place. I was on a low wage. I probably should have gone